welcome to today's video. Today's video is my first sort of tips, tricks and guide kind of video. I've taken this information from my blog post, which was very popular, which has had a few thousand views, so I thought I'd make a YouTube video about it. And today I'm going to give you 7 tips on how to sew straight with a sewing machine. So let's get into it with tip number 1. Okay, my first tip to start this video off is to watch the moving fabric, not the needle, while sewing. When you're sewing, it's very easy to watch the moving needle that's going up and down inside the fabric, but the best thing is to watch the fabric before it hits the needle. When the fabric hits the needle, it's too late to realise if you've gone wonky or not sewn straight, or to adjust the sewing direction. So always concentrate and hold the fabric before it hits the needle, because then you've got a little bit more time just to slowly adjust the angle that the machine is sewing at. Next tip I have for you is to make sure, if you're using pins, to pin correctly. Make sure when you're sewing that your pin heads are away from the sewing needle. So while it's going through the sewing machine and needle, you're able to take out those pins really easy in front of you. If you don't and you sew over a pin, or a pin gets caught, your stitching will also be wonky and it won't be straight. So always look at the way and directions that you're pinning. I have a blog post over on my blog all about pinning and the right way. So if you're unsure about that, I'll leave that link below and you can check that out. My next tip is speed. Don't sew too fast. On your domestic sewing machine, there normally is a guide or range that you can adjust the speed. Just because there's a higher speed doesn't always mean you have to use it. So sometimes just going slower is all you need to have a straighter stitch. Even now, most of the time I stitch on the higher speed, but if there's something more delicate or intricate, or that sort of like detailed stitching, I will just put the speed down slower, and to ensure that my stitching will be nice and straight. So always check your speed when you're sewing. This next tip, I didn't really realise until I went to uni, and I was obviously wearing outdoor shoes to sew, and it is look at your footwear. Footwear can really change how you feel if you're using a pedal to sew in a machine, which most people do. Some machines do have a start-stop, so this tip won't be applicable to that. But if you're using the foot pedal, always look at what shoes you're wearing. If you've got slippers or shoes with a really thick sole, that can also you can't feel the pedals, so you may be going faster or slower than you think you are, and therefore the stitching can not be straight because you're sewing at a different speed than you think of. And this is when I was always home sewer, so I'd always sew maybe in socks, so I could really feel the pedal. And then when I went to uni, and obviously I was wearing shoes, I was thinking, why can't I feel what I'm sewing, or why is the pedal? And it just didn't help. So then I ended up having special sewing shoes to take to uni, but while I was getting used to their machines and being able to sew with them. Next tip is to take breaks. This is something that I have had to kind of remind myself to do when I'm sewing, because I get so into the project, and it's to take breaks. When you get tired, or you need a break, your concentration goes more, and that's when you're more likely to make mistakes and for your stitching and sewing not to be straight. So always, if you feel like you're going wrong or the stitching, you're losing the concentration, always take a break, have a cup of tea, have a piece of cake, have whatever, and then come back to it, and you will sew a lot better. Okay, my next tip, and it's kind of 2 tips, so it's 2 in 1, is to use a measuring guide to ensure that you are sewing straight. On the bottom of your base plate, which is a piece of metal which the needle goes in and out and you lean on to push the fabric through, on there normally you'll have measuring guides, a little line kind of carved into that piece of metal, which will probably be, I think it's inches or centimetres, you know, whatever guide. So if you line up your fabric to whatever measurement you need, obviously as long as the measurement is correct that you need, line it up against one of these lines and watch that edge of that fabric going through against that line, and then you'll know if that piece of fabric edge is coming off that line, it means your stitch isn't straight. And also the second part of this tip is to also, you can use your sewing machine foot edge as a guide as well. You can line up the raw edge or a section or line of fabric on that edge of the foot, and then you can guide that along. That's often how I sew. I use the edge of the foot. So if I know the fabric is moving off of the edge of the foot, it means that my sewing isn't going to be straight. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. If you're interested in reading the blog post on tips on how to sew straight, I'll leave that linked below. So if you prefer to read the tips than listen on the video, you can always do that. Yeah, and I will see you again soon. Thank you, bye.